This is the Source Seeker Hour. I'm your host, Baruti Carl Alexander. I thank you all very much for joining us. This is our 95th episode, a very important discussion that we're having. We may have more guests join us to talk about the issue of critical race theory. For those who do not know, critical race theory is a subject that has been talked about, especially in political circles, and it is something that is being discussed or implemented in some public school settings. And in the public school settings, it's causing a furor. Some people are very upset about even the concept. What is critical race theory? It is a theory, it is a program, it is a concept being taught that we have to bring more fairness, more understanding of reality to the curriculum of the schools. And that has caused a great bit of dissension. And before I get into the issue, I want to invite my guest to introduce himself and to share with the audience who he is and what he does within the community. My brother.
Thank you for having me on the show. I sincerely appreciate it. My name is Tamani Mwandani. I am the founder of the Black Gold Nation movement. Our ultimate goal is putting our people in a position by which we can control or own the space where we live. Because when other people control the space around us, when they control the systems that exist in our environment, in our communities, we always seem to find ourselves on the bottom. So since we no longer want to be on the bottom, we believe that history has shown and proven that when we do our own thing as we see fit, when we're in control, we do just fine. As a matter of fact, we start outperforming other people, which is one of the reasons why they destroy every single thing that we do. So what I do is, I guess I'll say in a simple way, community development and nation building. I'm trying to put my people in a position by which we can win. And to do that, you have to have a few things. So that's who I am and that's what I do.
So this issue of critical race theory, what is your perspective about that? Why are people getting so upset about it from your perspective?
Well, I went to the source. I try not to speak about things that I don't understand or I don't know about. So I did a little research. And I actually found a video, an interview of the sister who coined the term critical race theory. So this is what she says about the term that she coined. Quote, "It's a way of looking at race, a way of looking at why after so many centuries since emancipation, we have patterns of inequality that are enduring. They are stubborn. And the point of critical race theory originally was to think and talk about how law contributed to the subordinate status of African Americans, of indigenous people, and of an entire group of people who were coming to our shores from Asia. And the point was to understand the problem in order to intervene in it." So I have another definition, but I won't bother reading that one from another sister, coincidentally. Sharp sisters, obviously intelligent. So my understanding from what I've learned, what I've listened to, and we actually did a show on it for the Revolutionary Code, the show that we do every Thursday. My understanding is that critical race theory is simply looking at how law has been used to make America what it is. Most of us who have an understanding of American history, especially if you're Black, that's not a leap. What's been done to us has been done to us because it's been public policy. It's been the law. Slavery was the law. Things were legal. Jim Crow was the law. It was legal. The school to prison pipeline, everything that happens for a reason, and it's not by an accident. So I don't know how we're ever going to move forward if we don't understand how these things work and how society is actually structured as opposed to how they tell us it's structured. So I think for those that are in an uproar, they don't want to talk about the truth of what America has done, what America is still doing, and what America is. And I think that critical race theory is being used as a red herring, a straw man argument, if you will, to try and incite a base of people who don't have a clue as to what critical race theory is, but because politician A says it's racist, it's bad, most people are going to research it. They're just going to take that person's word for it and then go from there. So I think people are anti it because A, they don't understand it. B, they haven't taken the time to understand it. And C, it's a false argument to incite their base for political reasons.
I have 2 points on that. I was watching an interview with a gentleman who was against critical race theory, and he said he finally looked at what they were being taught to his daughter, and he said, well, they are saying that these people did something bad. They held slaves, they beat them, they exploited them, and the way that it was presented that they were bad. And my daughter is of the race that did the bad thing, so I don't want that reflected upon my daughter to be thinking from that perspective. And so that was one perspective of a white gentleman, and he said, no, that's not right. Why should we demonize one group of people? And no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. So my question in that light is, if we came up with a different terminology, a lot of times the terminology, I believe, can create a situation where people get upset. You hear the name Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter, automatically those people who are not Black are going to feel defensive. You hear the term reparations, and those who understand what the terminology is saying, and they're not a part of those being repaired, they are part of those who caused the damage. They say, oh, wait a minute, that's not fair. So is one of the problems the terminology, and would it maybe be able to not cause as much problem if it was called a fair history perspective? And what do you say to that white gentleman who was upset at his daughter being taught that perspective?
Him being upset is the problem. White people don't want history to be taught truthfully. They don't want people to know what they have done to our people, to other people, to people of color worldwide. Here in Texas, they have already passed a law that you can't even teach proper history. That's a problem. And I don't know why it would make someone think that because white people have done things during slavery automatically means that this young white child is evil. I don't think anybody's ever said that. I don't think anybody's even saying that. And the fact that a person feels offended by that truth being taught, then that's something that they have to deal with. Truth is truth. And for those of us who understand American history, we have to be as diligent, as forthright, as unapologetically Black about our Holocaust and what's been done to us as the Jews are with their Holocaust. The Jews don't care about who you are, where you come from, what to respect. They're going to tell you about the Holocaust. And because they have power and they can do certain things, especially when it comes to movies, they're going to let you know every day, not every day, every year, multiple times a year. And in movies that pop up everywhere. So it's not our problem. It's not my problem that he has an issue with what his people have done. You need to take that up with your own group and have a conversation over there, because truth is truth and it needs to be taught. So that is what I would say to that gentleman. And I wouldn't have an issue with him personally. I think it's sad that he would feel offended that history is being taught and your people did some bad stuff. But a person shouldn't think that because history is being taught and a certain group has done some bad things, that automatically means that these young people are also evil. I don't know how they're making that leap. And again, I think all that is a part of that straw man argument.
Before we get into the other part of the question, I think he knows and he understands, and a lot of them are afraid that if you attribute certain things to culture, they are also come into the attraction or the building of power, the building of consciousness, the building of strength of community. And those who don't want that taught, they want to hold on to the emphasis on the mind that this way is the right way, this way is the wrong way. And when you start dealing with images and culture and you put it in a book, a lot of people attribute, okay, it was in the book, so they attribute that power, that rightness, that wrongness to it. And that's a big part of why they don't want anything taught. You know, they are even cringe at the fact that we may say, hey, George Washington was not perfect. He held slaves. He did this. Thomas Jefferson, he raped Sally Hemings.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
They don't want us dealing with the sacred cow. And you go to the fact of the statues, same thing. They want to hold those statues up. We saying, hey, so Robert Lee Lee was a good general of the Southern cause. He was still fighting to keep us as slaves. I don't care about a statue of Robert E. Lee, you know? So we have a different perspective, but they want to hold on to the thing that keeps them saying our perspective, our power should be everybody's power. You even go to the issue of the national anthem, and they having a discussion on that now. The NFL is saying, okay, we listening at the black players, and they say they want the black national anthem, lift every voice and sing. So we're gonna play that, but you know, there's still a lot of people saying, well, y'all might get boycotted. We might boycott y'all because of that. It's gonna be a slow road. But the second part of my question is this: could the terminology help pass or ease people's concern? If it was called a fair history perspective, would that make a difference?
No, because they're not going to accept your fair history perspective. What you just said is why it don't matter what we call it, because they are always going to promote their version of history, which makes them look like the good guys, makes them look fair, makes them look Christian, makes them look like the heroes. That's not the truth, and that's not history. So it doesn't matter what you call it.
I wouldn't just give you this perspective though. If you called it for instance, I was out reaching several times, and even though the can said PAOCC, a lot of people said, oh, Pan American. Mm-hmm. They said different things other than what the can said.
Sure.
And it's a possibility that it might could ease the burden. However, with anybody paying attention, it's still going to come back to the same thing.
Yeah.
And you may be just obfuscating by doing that. So I understand it's probably going to come back to, no, it's not going to make a difference. But even in the concept of reparations, I say if you don't use the term reparations, but you ask for the things you want and put different, you know, give blacks taxes free for 10, 20 years. Don't call it reparations, but call it something else. Maybe it has a possibility of passing. I'm just saying, I don't know. It's a thought, but I know reparations straight up will cause a very hard fight in a battle. What's your perspective on that conversation?
I don't know. Well, first off, I do not believe Black people are ever going to get reparations. I don't think white people are going to vote to give Black people reparations per se. However, if it was titled something else, who knows? I think we don't have the numbers to vote for reparations. I take that back. The numbers to win a vote for reparations. There simply aren't enough of us, and sadly, a lot of us wouldn't even vote in our own best interest to get reparations. So
that's because of our slanted mind.
Well, of course, and everything is a result of our mentality.
And that goes back to critical race theory in a lot of ways, because you educating the mind a certain way, and some accept Black inferiority because they were taught to accept Black inferiority.
That's right.
So, you know, and then some declare, you know, and they accept the declaration.
Right, right, and everything, brother, is a result of how we think. A lot of us don't know how to think, let alone critically think. So what I say to people all the time, because it's not only true, but it's one of my favorite movies, a lot of people live in the Matrix and don't have a clue that they're in the Matrix. And if
and what was that point in the movie Get Out, where he was saying he was stuck in the
sunken place,
the dungeon,
sunken place.
The sunken place, yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying about that. How can we were talking earlier about running for education and the educational board,
yeah.
local or state.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they have this concept, they have this question of critical race theory in the state boards, in the local boards, but the state board tells the local board what's acceptable. So I think we do have to be at the state, because there is no national education board in America. Now we do have the Department of Education, which gives advice, which gives certain benefits to the state board, but the state boards really make up the genesis of the educational curriculum across the country. So that's where I think the battle has to be fought. And somebody has to bring you the perspective of what is fair and why it's so important. So my question is this: if we were able to teach critical race or a perspective of truth, if we would that change everything? And have we been able to teach it 50 years ago, would this be a different country?
Yeah, I think teaching people the truth is most certainly a beneficial and helpful thing. I think if people had a better understanding of how things really happened, then their acceptance of certain things could be, and I venture to say probably would be, completely different. But the problem is what you were saying earlier about the statue of Robert E. Lee. People only want to look at one side of it. They don't look at the fact that he was an enemy to the country. He was committing treason by taking up arms against the country that everybody said they love. But he's a hero.
Yes.
So I think that's part of the problem. And you know, it's not just Black people that are in the Matrix. It's white people too. You know, there are people of all colors who are completely ignorant and don't know the truth. And I like to remind people that you know, there's nothing wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. And what happened to Black people is that truth that nobody wants to talk about. So education is always important if you're going to teach it the right way and the truthful way. But I'm always going to put the onus on us as opposed to another group to do what we need to do, because you don't see any other race trying to get other people or other races to teach their children their own history. You don't see that.
But I must point out, nobody has been engendered with the mark that we have.
True.
Like any other group of people. True. Also.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
When they were able to point centuries ago or how many ever years ago and say, okay, in 1880, whenever they carved up Africa and said, we're going to totally put this mark upon them, people from this continent.
Yeah.
And they coalesced as a unit of people. You had France, you had Germany, you had all of those countries.
It was a gangster coalition.
It was a gangster coalition.
Yes, sir.
To say that we are going to mark these people and we're going to take their resources.
That's right.
I want to take a break here, and and invite Dr. Fisher. How are you, ma'am? Can you hear me? Okay, well, we'll get back to you in a second. I appreciate you joining us. And if you get your audio together, we certainly will invite you in. We are on our 95th episode of the Sourceseeker Hour. I'm your host, Baruti Carl Alexander. We're talking about critical race theory. Very important issue. Why is it important? Why does it cause such a fervor among people, among politicians? So many different aspects of it. And in education, it's a very big issue, but it's also a discussion of what is truth. It's a discussion of what is truth, and do we really want to talk about the truth? Can we say that Thomas Jefferson was a great man, but he did some bad things? He raped, and we are accepting that rape, that he's a good man, but he did rape? Or you all want to say it wasn't rape then because it was legal? Okay, if that's the perspective you are saying. There's so many different aspects of that. And it comes in so many different directions. The statutes, what's in the history books, what's in literature books. So it's so many different parts of critical race theory. We want to, Dr. Fisher, are you available yet? She's still working on it. Well, we're going to continue the issue and hope the doctor gets in. So we're saying that maybe the country would be totally different. The world would be totally different if it was for truth being taught. Because you could go back to the Bible, you could go back to biblical days, and it's a saying that says, those who won the war, those who won the battle get to tell their story. Because the story that Rome would tell and the story that Carthage would tell are two totally different stories. And that's throughout history. The story that Marcus Garvey would tell and the story that, let's say, W.E.B. Du Bois would tell would be totally different, even though he came into a greater appreciation of Marcus Garvey. So it's so important what is written, what is talked about, and who's saying it. When you talk about world history, how possibly would that have been impacted if we really told the truth? Could you share about that?
It's always good to have a full and complete, truthful understanding of history, current events, life. However, power doesn't work that way. Like you just said, the winners of the wars write the history. They're going to write the history to make them look good because they have the power. It's not about fairness. It's not about equality. It's about power. And those with power make the rules and dictate how those rules are going to be implemented. If any group doesn't like how the rules are being implemented, then that group has to either understand how the rules work, how the system works, and start maneuvering to change those rules. B, work in their communities to ensure those rules don't negatively impact their youth, their people, their community. Or C, both. So it's good to teach truth, but that will never happen because the powers that be wouldn't allow it.
Not say what C is, which is C has been used all throughout life.
Well, I say C is both.
Well, I guess it's D then.
Okay, so what is D?
The D has to be war.
Oh, sure.
And that's been used throughout life also.
Oh, sure,
and
of course.
Got to be honest about that.
Of course.
You
of
know,
course. And I wouldn't take D off the table.
Well, I mean, if you look at the MAGA movement and you look at the insurrection that's a group of people that do not like certain things that are happening.
Yep.
And so they really want to try to change that. And they went through different processes and they had some success. Actually got a president up there, but were not to change everything that they wanted. So they were, threatening Part D in a lot of ways. Now they're still dealing with Part A, Part B, but there's so many different aspects. And that goes back, and those are a lot of the people that don't want critical race theory in any kind of way. Hi, Dr. Fisher, are you there?
Yes, I don't know if I'm on. I'm having some problems.
Well, we can hear you, and that's a good start. We're having the discussion of critical race theory, and this is the 95th episode of the Sourceseeker Hour. You're here with myself, Baruti Carl Alexander, the Sourceseeker, and you're here with Brother Tamani, and we are having a very vibrant discussion, and we would love to hear some of your views on critical race theory.
Well, I was kind of just informed at the end. I'm really not sure exactly where you are on the comments. For some reason I couldn't get my video, but I would like to say that this is all something new. But I remember so many years ago when I did some research, we talked about white privilege all the way back then, and it was one thing that stuck with me, and that was way back in the 80s. So it's kind of strange that it's being treated as if it's a new event when it's been around for so long. I guess it's just being viewed through different eyes, different conversations, but in reality, it has always been a part of the culture, and it's been a part, and even when you think in terms of history, it's his story. And so it's always had a lot of slanted views, but like I said, I'm not sure where y'all are in the discussion, but.
Well, we're right where you are coming from. You're coming from, it's always been a perspective that different views beyond his story are not necessarily desired or accepted. And we are talking about truth. And if you really bring in truth and you come from the perspective Thomas Jefferson was a great man, but he also raped Sally Hemings. If you come from the perspective of Senator John Calhoun was a great senator, but hey, he was against slavery. And Robert E. Lee, he was a great general from their perspective, but he fought against Black people ever having rights. So we probably are at the same place.
Yes, I would. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's getting more and more. It's almost like which perspective you're looking at. Everybody's seeing. I know we used to participate in a project called Project Reach. It was a multicultural training. And it was where people could look at the same event and interpret it totally differently based on what their age and their background and their just general preferences were. And so I guess when we start telling the story, and if you're interested in like the truth, and I know it's not it's kind of broad to say we've identified so many different truths, and until you're trying to kind of shift through, it's almost at the point where when everyone's talking about critical race theory now, we're talking about whose truth is truth. And I've used it several times. Just the prime example that we've just seen with the episode at the White House on January 6th. It was told through so many different eyes, but everybody saw the same event. But evidently, it wasn't interpreted based on what we all saw at the same time. So, truth is,
yes, ma'am. Just like in a situation where you see a car wreck three different people may
Yeah.
have a different perspective, but the perspective that we come from is a perspective of our experiences, and our experiences are going to be different from a person from a different community's experience. For us, MAGA or Make America Great Again has a whole different meaning. It has certainly a whole different meaning. And we understand that it's a movement to take things back to a different time where people had less opportunity and different perspectives were not necessarily as open or as welcome or as accepted. So, and in this climate, critical race theory in a lot of ways is trying to be used as a boogeyman, trying to be used as the thing that will rev up a base, rev up people against a certain group of people. Do you agree with that, Dr. Fisher?
Well, I can see how it can be misused, and because if you're looking at a situation, it takes a lot to really see without bias, and I do know that it's being misused because it's not something that hasn't been covered. You know, we've had even when we talked about Black history, even as an educator, we brought in a lot of different elements, but they weren't treated as if it was a threat. But you know, it takes a lot for a person to see things that have gone on and admit that that wasn't right. You know, like I mean, we can look at slavery, and we can look at all the people that were involved, and predominantly it was they're African. Even though some African Americans maintained slaves, the bulk of it wasn't like that. And so even though we're looking at those events, it's hard to say that, I mean, it's kind of hard to receive the fact that those were my ancestors, those were the people that we loved, those were the people that we came from. But they did this, and yet it wasn't acknowledged as something just painful and hurtful. So yes, I can agree with you that it's really hard to, so it's hard to admit that it was an ugly part in the lives of a lot of people, and it did benefit people that it was a lot of benefit gained from it, but not from African Americans or those that were in those positions. So it's always going to be, you know, when you really look hardcore, do you really want to see?
If I can clarify, are you saying that, of course, there were Black people that turned other Black people in. They did certain things to hurt other Black people as far as you know, helping take away their rights, or help taking away their humanity?
Well, what I'm saying, actually, you know, there were slave owners that were African American. There were actually Black people, but they weren't of a majority or anything. But they were, even in this region that we live in. I recently read an article about a group in this East Texas area that maintained it. But what I'm saying is that the numbers were so small in proportion to their participation. But I guess my focus would be on if something like if your relatives own slaves, it's hard to see I don't know, not see, but kind of to face that's a shameful part of your heritage in that sense. And
it certainly would be painful. Brother Tamani, what's your comment on hearing that?
Which part?
Well, we know that there were Black people that did things to other Black people, but you know, the part about, you know, being a Black slave owner, I hadn't really heard about that in any way. But from the perspective of critical race theory, I think it's, you know, for the most part, that's kind of a moot point. But critical race theory deals with a whole group of people, not giving them a perspective of honor or a perspective of truth. So what is your perspective of the magnitude of which we are, I guess, a part of the blame of what happened? I don't think we're very much a part of the blame. I
No.
say an enemy did this.
No, I
Dr.
think
Fisher, did you want to cut in?
Yeah, I think that you kind of carried it. What I wanted to do was, even as we talked about slavery, I did want to just acknowledge that there were some, but I am in no way indicating that they're to blame for what happened. It wasn't a blaming thing. It's just that when you acknowledge, someone might come back and say, well, you know, there were other slave owners that weren't white. But what my point was, when you engage in an activity of that magnitude, that it does leave a stain on your heritage. So it wasn't who was doing it, it's if it's in your heritage. And so what I'm saying, it's hard for people to deal with it on I think that's some of the underlying problems with the critical race theory, is that you have to admit that there were some bad things happened, and you have to be willing to share them openly. And I think that's why it keep getting cut out of the history. People want it cut out of as a part of our education, but it's hard to leave out part of the history and it be valid. So my statement was that yes, there might have been. There were. It's definite. It's documented. There might have been, but I'm saying the majority of the people that are having problems with the critical race theory is that they don't want the whole story told across the board. And my contention was simply because it's hard to acknowledge that your ancestors engaged in practices that hurt another race, another group of people, and it hurt them. It destroyed families. They used them as cattle. Initially they weren't counted as whole people, and so that's shameful. And it's always hard to admit that kind of shame.
And certainly, it wasn't just during slavery, but of course the time of Jim Crow and all of those days also. So it certainly had an impact psychologically, and it still has an impact today. It still has an impact today on our minds, our spirits. But even despite that, Black people are rising above. And if that had happened to any other group of people, they may not have been able to overcome. But we are such a spiritual people that we're still here, we're still standing, and we're still strong, even with all our warts and all our ugliness. Let Brother Tamani share in this conversation. Brother Tamani, you've heard a couple of our conversations, what we've been saying. What is your comment on it?
Well, a lot was said. I'll say, as it relates to a Black person owning slaves, I do not know if that Black person was as brutal as the white slave owner. I do not know if they were trying to protect Black people. I don't know enough about it to comment on that specifically. What I do know is that no Black person had the power to control the system of slavery. Slavery was geopolitical. It was a worldwide business. No Black person had that kind of power. And I understand that Dr. Fisher was not saying that, but people do say, I've met people that I was in the military with, white people, that were quick to say, well, there were Black slave owners too. Be that as it may, they didn't run the system. And they certainly didn't run it on any significant level. So if there were Black people that own other Black people, I don't know enough about the details of that ownership, but I know that it wasn't on the same level or same scale. As it relates to critical race theory, again, my understanding is that critical race theory is trying to understand how the laws have been used to subjugate, oppress, and repress people, people of color specifically. If a person believes that that is a bad thing to study, then that person has an issue with truth, and we should not talk as if it is something in the past, because as you stated, Brother Baruti, things are still being done. From the time we got here to now, things have been done. If you were to add up all the years of everything that's been done to us and how long it lasted, from slavery to Jim Crow to redlining, gerrymandering, school to prison pipeline, crack cocaine, blah, all that stuff, it will be over 3,000 years of stuff that the system did to us on purpose, and they did it because it was the law. Public policy is what made it so. So we're never going to be able to move forward and do anything if we're not willing to understand and study that truth. But my contention is that we cannot afford to wait for someone else to teach us and our people and our children the truth. The community has to step up. And we have, like we were saying earlier, we have to do A, B, C, and keep D in the cut, because we can't afford to go to other people who have proven that they don't care about us to teach us, our people, our children the truth, because they never will. They want the statue of Robert E. Lee up. They want to think of George Washington in a certain way. They want to think of the founders in certain ways. But these people they did some very bad. All of the founding fathers owned slaves, and I don't know how you're going to run from that. But you know, if anything is done to try and shine a light on the darkness and the evil that's been done, people don't want to look at that. Like Dr. Fisher said, they don't want to look at what their family has done, what their people have done, how they got the money that they have, how they have the land that they have, what their race has done to another. People don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to talk about it. It's in the past. Let it go. Blah blah blah. So,
but as we know, without truth, without a true understanding of truth, you can't really have a real progress. Without a true understanding, if you only get a certain slant of the picture, you only can have a certain slant of progress. At least that's my opinion of it. And it's real important to know actually what happened. Actually, even if you're not going out and just sharing it everywhere, you at least got to know the truth. What does it say? To yourself, at least know the truth. To thyself, be true. You at least have to know the truth yourself so you can understand a very important perspective. I just want to share this. We're getting toward the end of our show, our 95th episode of the Sourceseeker Hour. I took a trip recently to Memphis, Tennessee, of course, the home of the Lorraine Motel, and where Dr. King was killed. And one of the things that I wanted to do was share with my kids some of the history. And on the wall of the Civil Rights Museum, it's a big building now that the Lorraine Motel is the front of, but it has a big building behind it and filled with civil rights history. And on the right behind the Lorraine Motel is the history. And then across the street from the angle where Dr. King was shot from, where they say the bullet came from, they give the history of the investigation. And it's so apparent that he was set up. They removed any Black people from the area. There were firemen, there were different Black people, Black policemen that were supposed to be on duty, but they made sure that they were gone. And there were so many different perspectives. But the thing I wanted to share with my kids was, my son, he kind of gives the impression that he believes Black people are sensitive. In my opinion, that's the perspective that I get that he is giving to me. And what I said was, would all these things be on the wall of this building all over, and such history, every incident, the Little Rock Nine, all the beatings, what happened to Megan Avers, and so many different things. Would all this stuff be on the wall if we were just being sensitive? It must be something to it. And even if, you know, he doesn't take it all in, he has to take that through his mind. And yes, we have made great advances, but there's so much more to do. And critical race theory, however we come at this issue of truth, is very important, because because we're so much bombarded by what's on the TV. We're so much bombarded by what's on the internet. And we've gone past the time of where we read, we try to understand, but even with our reading, if we're reading the wrong thing, or we're reading only a slant of the truth, can we really have a true shaping of our mind? Can we have a true understanding of who we are? I had a conversation with a lady who said, I want, you know, I want to be all I can. And she was saying that, but I'm saying, okay, you have to understand that people are invested in shaping who you are, who you can be. And if you accept all the different things that come to you, you're not getting a full perspective. So it's very critical how we approach the issue of critical race theory. And it's not just in law, brother Tamani. It's in culture. It's in media. It's in the internet. It's in every platform that can come into your mind. So it's in subliminal ways.
Yeah,
So
I was just saying that critical race theory specifically dealt with how laws have been used.
Yes.
Yeah, it did.
Yes, Dr.
You know,
Fisher?
I just said, you know, if they, if I had just read a couple of several articles not too long ago, that it kind of deals with different categories of you know, of the whiteness is property, I think was one of the one he mentioned, and that it's also been a permanent part of it. And so it's broken to segments, not on, but even in the wealth and all of that. But you know, I know you're going to end. The one thing that I would just like to, it's the African Americans. There comes a point that even no matter what's being written, there comes a point where you have to take ownership of what's happening. Like you took the time to talk with your child. You know, I've been in education. Well, I've retired from education after 30 plus, but I had a background in it, and I'm still working partially in it. But even our churches, which have been the foundation, and I'm an ordained minister, but we need to take responsibility. There have been some horrible things. We're I don't know if you're in the South, but we're in the heart of East Texas, and so we know that there are a lot of things, but there still remains the responsibility that unless we train and teach and take that responsibility, the schools are a reflection of what people vote into them in terms of administrators and those, and they do have a critical impact on our community. But the other point that I was making is that we need to take control of our stories in the areas that we can control.
Yep. And,
you know, and it's in our churches, it's in our communities, it's in the small projects we do, it's in our education, it's in our workplace. You know, we shouldn't allow anybody to tell our story for us. It should always, I mean, we're just going to have to come forth and tell it. And like you said, our children, they haven't been exposed to as much, and depending on the type of schooling that they've had and depending on where they've attended. But they're in tune to some things when they're not right, that they're not hearing the full thing. And like you said, your son said, sometimes we might be overreacting, but if we start early enough and just explain that this wasn't a good event, but it wasn't a fair event, and kids naturally have a real strong sense of fairness. But if you give them the facts, they're just not being given all of the whole picture. But that responsibility still lies with us as a people. That we're responsible to start getting our story out and start expanding, as you said earlier, the truth. We need to be able to tell the whole story and not accept that a portion of it. And like I said, even though we put a real caption on it with critical race theory, but like I said, that's not a new concept. That's been around for a long time. But it's been, as you said, it's been misused to make people look like it just came up and people are fighting unnecessarily. But no, it's always necessary to have the truth and to have a full range of knowledge of what's being taking place. So not to sound redundant, I just think that we need to accept responsibility as a people to tell a story. You know, when the children of Israel came across the Red Sea, he told them to take a few stones. And when they asked them about the stones, tell them what happened. And so we need to let them see a few stones and tell them what really happened, the story of how it really was, and be able to explain it. And it's not to hurt anybody, it's not to put anybody down, but it is to give us an understanding of where we need to go. I do know how important we don't dwell on the past, but it's important to know where you came from. And you'll be in a better position to put it in its proper perspective.
Yes, ma'am. That's very powerful. And we do have a responsibility. And a show like this and different platforms like this, the more we can have and to share with our community, our kids, our children, that is better. And as I like to say, the more circles we can build of truth, the more circles we can build of community and highlight those circles, the better off we can be. And we do need to tell the truth. And I'd like to always mention this. There have been episodes in our history where Black people have risen up, whole communities, like the Tulsa community. But in that situation and in 100 other situations, an enemy came in and helped destroy that community. But we can't let that dissuade us today. We just got to understand there are challenges, and we can do everything right, and there's still going to be challenges. And we still got to just pick ourselves up and move forward. You want to cut in, Brother Tamani?
I'm sorry, I missed that last point. Say that again.
What I said was, even with all our things that we've been through in our culture, we have built up communities that were very prosperous, very community oriented, like the Tulsa community that were destroyed. And there were 100 communities. I was in Little Rock, and they were sharing that they had a whole section of town that was destroyed from the outside. So we've had challenges, we've had different things, but with the grace of God, we keep moving forward and we keep rising above those different things that are trying to hold us back, and we keep holding strong and still moving forward. And that's what we got to keep teaching our kids. Keep moving, keep doing it, and powerful things still can happen. We're at the end of our show, and I want to give everybody, our guests, a chance to give a final statement. And if they would like to share how to get in touch with them, I would like for them to do that also. Dr. Fisher, would you like to give your final statement?
Well, my final statement is that we do have control of the things that we have control of, and those things are training and teaching. And I'll just briefly mention that we do an African American newspaper, have done it for the last 12 years, but we're always in the media. And I restored our Juneteenth celebration, which is more about it's about building the community, and I've been doing it for 36 years now. And so I'm saying we have the abilities to do things, but we must take responsibility for making sure that our story is told in full. And as you already previously mentioned, that the whole truth goes forth.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like to share with people how they can reach you if they want to talk to you?
Well, you can reach me through my email, and currently I serve as the mayor of the city of Crockett. I'm the first elected African-American mayor for the city of Crockett. And you can, awesome. My email is ianthiaf@yahoo.com. And I will spell my name for you. IANTHIAF as in Fisher @yahoo.com.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fisher, Mayor of Crockett, Texas. Can you share with us where Crockett, Texas is in the platform of Texas?
I sure will. Actually, Crockett is the county seat for Houston County, and it's in Houston County, which is the oldest county in Texas. And we are actually kind of midways between Houston and Dallas, close to the east side of them. So if you know where Huntsville is, we're right in that area. We're in the heart of East Texas.
Know it very well. Blessings. Thank you very much, ma'am. We hope to talk to you again.
Okay, well, you have a blessed one.
Yes, ma'am. Brother Tamani, you want to give your final statement?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Fisher. We need to take ownership and control of our own story, our own history. But we also need to do what she has done. She's a mayor of a small city or a town. There are 1,700 predominantly Black towns and cities that are relatively small. If we controlled those towns and cities, we could put things in place where we wouldn't have to worry about someone else's perspective of critical race theory, because we would control the education system. If this thing is going to work on our behalf, we have to be involved politically, and we have to control spaces politically so we can do our own thing and not allow other people to do it. And if we don't do that, we're always going to be on the losing end. If people want to reach me, they can reach me at my email, the Black Gold Nation, BLACKGOLD, Black Gold, which is your melanin, blackgoldnation@gmail.com. And the website is blackgoldnation.com.
Peace and power, my brother. This has been a great show. Our 95th episode of the Sourceseeker Hour, Critical Race Theory. On the Sourceseeker Hour, we have many different subjects we talk about. We just had a discussion of the soul of Black America. We have many discussions on the mental health of Black America, the mental health of our communities. And we talk about many different issues. I'm your host, Baruti Carl Alexander. This is our 95th episode. We've been doing this a while, and we're going to keep doing it. And those of you who want to reach me, just type in Baruti Carl Alexander on any platform, and some way will come up that you can reach me. I'm out there everywhere. And I'm blessed to still be here, and I thank you all very much. And this has been a beautiful show, and we will see you in 2 weeks on the Sourceseeker Hour. Blessings to my guests. Blessings to those out there in the community. Blessings, and everybody take care. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.